In 1837, in a farmhouse kitchen in western Pennsylvania, a woman knelt at an open hearth to move a spider skillet off the coals. Her skirt drifted a hand's width too close. In that century, burns taken at the hearth were among the most common ways an American woman died inside her own house. Not fever, not childbirth, the kitchen. But here is the twist. The machine that ended those funerals, that halved the woodpile and put running hot water in houses with no plumbing at all, we hauled out to the scrap pile and sold by the pound. Calling it a stove is like calling a barn a box. It was a plant. One iron firebox, burning wood you cut yourself, that cooked 3 meals, baked the week's bread, heated the downstairs, dried your boots, boiled your wash water, and filled a 30-gallon tank for Saturday night. 6 jobs, 1 fire, no meter on the wall. Sears, Roebuck sold it out of a catalog for less than a good coat cost. Farm families bought it off a wagon on credit and ran it for 50 years. Ask yourself something honest. If the power went out in your county in January and stayed out a month, could you cook a hot supper, heat your house, and draw a hot bath from one fire? Your great-grandmother did that daily and did not consider it an accomplishment. She considered it Tuesday. That is the sovereignty we are taking back today. Not fear, not hoarding. The ordinary competence of running a household off heat you made yourself. Before we get into the iron, pull the trigger on subscribe. Not for me. The buried skills we drag back into daylight here, you are going to want the next one. There are 7 parts to this machine. Any farm boy in 1910 could have named the first 4 before breakfast. The 5th stops modern people cold because it is running water with no pump. The 6th is where the appliance companies made their fortune, and I will give you the year and the campaign. The 7th is the one that fills a chimney with fire or kills a family in their sleep. We build to it, in order. So the question is not what we forgot. It is who cashed the check when we forgot it and what it costs you every month now. Part 1. The firebox. Picture a cast iron cook stove on a plank kitchen floor, nickel trim on the doors, a warming shelf up top, a woman in an apron feeding it split oak at 5 in the morning. The firebox is small, and that is the design. A chamber the size of a bread box on the left end, an iron grate across the bottom, an ash pan sliding underneath. Small chamber, small wood. Stove wood was its own commodity in this country. Split to the thickness of your wrist, cut 12 to 16 inches. Stacked in ricks by the kitchen door. The grate holds the fire up so air comes from underneath and lets ash drop clear so the fire does not smother in its own leavings. Under it is your throttle. The draft door on the ash pit feeds oxygen. Open it, the fire roars. Close it down, the fire crawls. A family cooking and heating year-round burned 4 to 6 cords. Seasoned hardwood, cut 6 to 12 months ahead so the moisture drops under 20% because green wood does not burn. It boils, and everything it fails to burn goes up your pipe as tar. Small wood, hot fire, short burn. What ruins a beginner is the log. A man used to a wood heater loads a big, round chunk, shuts the door, and wonders why his skillet will not come up. A cookstove is a controlled burn you feed by the handful every 10 minutes all day long. That is the trade. This week, split 10 pieces to wrist thickness and stand them apart from your pile. That is what stove wood looks like. Part 2. The cooktop. Your great-grandmother over a black iron surface, 6 round lids set into it, a coffee pot pushed to one side, and beans to the other. That top is not one temperature. It is a map. The plate directly over the firebox is searing heat. Walk your hand right and every plate drops cooler, out to the far corner over the reservoir where a pot holds a simmer all afternoon untouched. The lids lift out. That is what the lid lifter is for. Pull a lid and your skillet sits in the flame path. Leave it in and you cook on hot iron. 2 heats from 1 hole. She did not turn a dial, friend. She moved the pot. Coffee forward to boil, back to hold. Beans to the cool end for 6 hours. The rhythm of a farm kitchen was sliding iron around a heat map she had memorized with her hands. The Department of Agriculture and the State Extension Services were publishing farm home bulletins teaching new brides to read a stovetop by zone well into the 20th century. That is not folklore. That is the federal government printing what she did by instinct. The botch is impatience. A beginner puts everything on the hottest plate because a modern range trains you that way. 4 burners all the same, all on demand. Then the milk scorches and he decides the old way does not work. The old way works fine. The reflex is what is broken. Today, boil a pot on your own stove, move it to the smallest back burner on the lowest setting, and see how long it holds without you. That is the muscle you are rebuilding. Part 3. The oven. Lamplight, a woman opening a heavy iron door with a folded rag and sliding in a sheet of white paper. Not bread, paper. There is no thermometer on a stove from 1902. None. She baked light bread, biscuits, pies, and cakes in it every week of her adult life without one. The oven is a sealed iron box on the right side, heated not by fire underneath, but by flue gas routed around it. That is what the oven damper does. Push it in, and the hot gas leaving the firebox is forced across the top of the oven, down the far side and under the bottom before it reaches the pipe. Pull it out, and the gas goes straight up the chimney while the cooktop stays hot. 1 lever, 2 machines. Eli's journal gives 3 tests. The paper test. Lay a clean sheet of white paper on the rack. Dark brown in about 3 minutes is a hot oven, your biscuits and quick breads. Light golden at 5 minutes is moderate, your loaf bread and cakes. Barely colored is slow, your beans and long roasts. The hand test. Open the door, hand in at rack level, and count. Out before 10 is hot. 20 to 25 is moderate. The flour test. Scatter a spoon of flour on a pan. Golden in 1 minute means ready for bread. Paper, hand, flour. I ruined a batch of bread when I was 12. I had the splitting to do, and I did not want to do it, so I split the wood big to save myself the swings. The firebox never came up. My grandmother's loaves came out heavy as brick, and the crust never took. Eli watched the whole thing, and he did not yell. He said, "Now you know. The stove eats small." The failure mode is the door. Every peak dumps your heat, and there is no element to snap back on and recover for you. You read the oven before the food goes in, then you shut the door and you trust it. This weekend, run the paper test in your own oven at 350 degrees. Watch what 3 minutes of browning actually looks like. That is the calibration she had in her eyes. Part 4. The reservoir. On the right end of an old range sits a rectangular iron or copper tank with a hinged lid. 4 to 6 gallons. Nobody lit a fire to heat that water. The water sits against the iron and the flue path and takes its heat from the fire already burning for supper. Free by the time it reaches you. Warm every morning for washing. Hot every evening for dishes. Saturday night, it went by the bucket to a galvanized tub in front of the stove, and a family of 6 bathed one after another in the same warm room while the iron held the kitchen at 70 degrees. Now the 2 columns. That reservoir cost nothing to run because the heat was already made and headed for the sky. A tank water heater today runs $1,200 to $2,000 installed, then burns fuel around the clock, keeping 40 gallons hot through the 11 hours nobody wants a drop of it. Engineers call that standby loss. She called it a reservoir and never paid a cent. The reservoir never went cold. The billing cycle just started. Pattern break, friend. Everything so far, a farm boy in 1910 could have shown you in an afternoon. What comes next is the part that stops modern people, because it is plumbing and it runs on nothing. Part 5. The waterfront. Inside the firebox of a better range is something that does not look like it belongs. A hollow cast iron plate forming part of the firebox wall, with 2 pipes running out the back of the stove to a tall, galvanized cylinder standing beside it. 30 gallons, sometimes 40, often painted to match the kitchen. Here is how it worked, and there is no motor in this story. Water enters the firebox coil through the bottom pipe and heats. Hot water is less dense than cold, so it rises on its own, up the top pipe into the top of the tank. Cold water in the tank sinks, runs back down, and takes its turn in the fire. Around and around, driven by nothing but the weight difference between hot and cold. Engineers call that a thermosiphon. No pump, no valve, no electricity, and nothing that can break because nothing moves. Rooftop solar, hot water systems from Israel to Australia still run on that principle. The physics did not die. The catalog just got glossier. Picture the house, honestly. It is 1912. No power line within 9 miles, no gas main, and there never will be one. And in that kitchen stands 30 gallons of hot water made by the same fire cooking the beans. A farm wife opened a tap and got hot water 20 years before the line reached the county road. I am not your plumber friend, and I will say the honest thing. A waterfront tied to a sealed tank with no working relief path is a pressure vessel over a fire, and old ranges have hurt people who plumbed them wrong. Putting one back in service is a licensed job with a proper temperature and pressure relief valve. There is no shame in hiring it done. Part 6. The Warming Closet. Above the cooktop sits a second iron box on legs with its own doors. Sometimes a plain shelf, sometimes a full cabinet with a nickel rail. It is the least impressive part of the machine and maybe the most instructive because it exists for one reason. The fire was going to make that heat anyway, and letting heat leave a house unused was, in that culture, a small sin. So the warming closet raised bread dough on a January morning when the kitchen was too cold to proof. It held plates warm. It dried apple rings and sage on wire racks. It kept a plate hot for the man still out in the barn at 8 o'clock. Farm families put weak newborn lambs and half-froze chicks in that box and brought them back. Below it, sad iron sat heating in a row because the fire that baked the bread pressed the Sunday shirts. In 1871, a young woman in Ottumwa, Iowa, named Mary Florence Potts, patented a sad iron with a detachable wooden handle, so the handle stayed cool while 3 iron bodies rotated on the stovetop. She was barely out of her teens and it sold across the country. Count the jobs, neighbor. Cooking, baking, heating, water heating, drying, laundry, brooding livestock, proofing bread. 1 firebox, 1 fuel, 1 purchase. When a power plant captures its own waste heat today, the Department of Energy calls it combined heat and power and treats it as one of the most efficient things a system can do. She did it with a lid lifter and never used the phrase. If this is landing, hit subscribe. Now let us follow the money. The unbundling. Here is the year to circle. In 1935, the Rural Electrification Administration was created by executive order, and the Rural Electrification Act followed in 1936. Before that, roughly 1 American farm in 10 had electricity. Within 20 years, nearly all of them did. That was a real thing done for real reasons, and I am not going to stand here and call a power line a villain. But watch who walked through the door it opened. The American Gas Association had been organized since 1918, and through the 20s and 30s, it ran the modern kitchen campaigns that taught American women to be embarrassed by iron and ash. Then, in 1956, General Electric and the electric utility industry launched Live Better Electrically, with the Medallion Home program right behind it, putting a bronze plaque by the front door of any house wired to run everything on current. The pitch was never that the Cookstove failed. Read the advertisements yourself. The pitch was that it was dirty, that it was rural, that it was what your mother had. They did not sell you a better machine. They sold you a feeling about the one you owned. And here is the trade. 1 stove got replaced by a range, a water heater, a furnace, and a clothes dryer. 4 machines where there was one. 4 purchases, 4 installations, 4 failure points, and every one of them wired to a meter that turns whether you are home or not. A good steel range out of the catalog in that era ran up to about $25. Call it $800 in today's money for the whole works. Price a modern range, a water heater installed, and a furnace installed, and you are north of $8,000 before anyone has burned a thing. Then the bill starts. 1 machine, no meter. 4 machines forever. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. Nobody outlawed your grandmother's range. There was no dollar in her keeping it and considerable dollars in her replacing it, and a marketing budget found the difference. And if there is a gas range and an electric water heater in your house right now, and there is one in mine, That is not on you. They are good at selling. Pattern break. Everything up to here is the machine working. What comes next is the machine killing people. Part 7. The flue. A stovepipe running black across a kitchen ceiling into a brick chimney. 6 inches of thin steel, a damper wheel in the middle, and every bit of your safety riding on it. The stove does not work because of the fire. It works because of the draft. Hot gas rising in the chimney pulls fresh air in through the ash pit door and across the fire. Break the draft and everything fails at once. 2 things kill people here. The first is creosote. Wood smoke carries unburned tar, and when flue gas cools below roughly 250 degrees on the way up, that tar condenses inside your pipe as a black glaze. Burn wet wood or choke the fire to a smolder, and you build it fast. Then one hot fire lights it, and a chimney fire runs at temperatures that crack masonry and set roof framing alight. The National Fire Protection Association keeps a standard for exactly this, NFPA 211, and the Chimney Safety Institute of America tells homeowners to have the system inspected once a year. That is the modern fire service confirming what every farm family knew when they ran a brush down the pipe each fall. The second is carbon monoxide, a cracked flue, a rusted joint, a bird nest in a summer chimney nobody checked. No smell, no color, and it kills people in their beds. The Centers for Disease Control puts unintentional carbon monoxide deaths in this country above 400 a year. We lost a neighbor on this ridge to a bad flue. He was not careless. He was tired, and it was October, and he did not have $20 of alarm on the wall. I am not your fire marshal, friend, and I say that out of respect. The flue is the licensed part. Proper clearances, proper liner, proper inspection every year. The failure mode is the one that feels smartest. A beginner wants the fire to last, so he shuts the damper and the ash door down to nothing and lets it smolder overnight. That feels like thrift. It is how you glaze a chimney in one winter. Here is how it was done. You bank a fire, rake the live coals into a pile at the center of the grate. Cover them with a shovel of ash and close the drafts only after the wood is burned down to coal and there is no smoke left to trap. 8 hours later, you open the ash door, lay kindling on the pile, and the fire is alive without a match. Rake, cover, close, and only after the smoke is gone. Do this today. Put a carbon monoxide alarm outside every sleeping room in your house. $20 a piece. That applies whether you ever own a Cookstove or not. The whole machine. The firebox eats wrist-thick splits of seasoned hardwood every 10 minutes, 4 to 6 cords a year. The cooktop is a heat map, and you move the pot instead of turning a dial. The oven runs on routed flue gas, one damper, reed with paper, hand, and flour. The reservoir holds hot water off heat already spent. The waterfront and the range boiler make running hot water on nothing but the fact that hot water rises. The warming closet catches what the fire had left over. And the flue decides whether all of it is a kitchen or a funeral. 1 fire, 6 jobs, no meter. This was never really about iron, neighbor. It was about being a household that cannot be switched off from somewhere else. If the line goes down in an ice storm, you eat hot and you sleep warm. That is the difference between a man who owns his own hearth and a man who rents his safety by the month. That is not doom talk. The stores are open. The lights are on. Civilization is fine. This is about dignity and about knowing how the thing works. You do not have to buy a range this weekend. Do one thing on Saturday. Put a carbon monoxide alarm outside your bedroom door and run the paper test in the oven you already own so you learn what a hot oven looks like instead of what a number tells you. Your great-grandmother ran an entire household off one machine and a woodpile she cut herself, and nobody ever handed her a certificate for it. Somebody just did not get the chance to hand it down to you. That is what I was here for tonight. Tell me down below, did your grandmother have a reservoir on her stove, and which end was it on? Did anybody in your family keep a warming closet going for bread? Different regions built these different ways, and the story that gets the most comments is the story I go deep on next. Next time, the spring house, how a stone box built over a cold creek kept a family's milk, butter, and meat safe through August with no ice and no compressor, and the year the refrigerator men made sure your grandmother stopped trusting running water. Keep the old ways, they kept us.